how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're going to get.
This episode, I get to travel down to sunny Jupiter, Florida to meet Andrew Kato, the artistic producing director of the Maltz Jupiter Theatre. This man is accomplishing quite a lot. With his theater alone, since he's started it, so much has happened down there with productions. They're upgrading their equity status for pre-Broadway engagements. They're renovating for larger rehearsal space. But it's not just about this theater in Jupiter. It's the conversation that he's having within the theater community across the country. It's the energy that he's putting out into the world that resonates across the country from Jupiter, Florida. He's also a producer for the Tony Awards, and he does so much more. We discuss his upbringing. He worked at the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre prior to becoming the Maltz Jupiter Theatre, and his stories and conversations are hilarious and fascinating. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Andrew Kato. We are back, and today with me is Andrew Kato in beautiful Jupiter, Florida. Andrew, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I was doing some research on you, and the internet is a wonderful and yet sometimes mistaken place, so correct me if anything I say is wrong.
Sure.
But what I was reading is that you sometimes average 10 meetings a day?
That is absolutely true.
Am I the first one of the day?
You are the first one of the day. Most theater people, even on Broadway, they start later in the morning, 10 o'clock, because we end up doing very late nights. So, you got to get your rest in somewhere. But it's true. Yeah. I'm a bit unique as the producing artistic director and chief executive here, that I am, a lot of regional theaters have a managing director and an artistic director, but in my case, I use one brain for this, and I'm both. So that means that I'm checking in with a lot of departments and overseeing, a big company, an $8 million organization. Yeah. So most of my work is done in meetings with different departments, and it's actually a little schizophrenic sometimes, because at one time you could be talking about financial numbers, and then the next moment you're going into a meeting about the following season and artistically how you're going to accomplish that. So, but it makes for a very fast day.
Yeah, it does. How many shows do you direct? Do you direct any of the shows here, or how many?
No, my background is in producing, and so it's not that I haven't directed. I like to dip my toe in the water every once in a while, mostly to keep myself honest, and also it gives you a perspective on our organization that you don't get to see. I get to see it from the director's point of view. For example, one of the reasons why in our renovation and our build out that we're going to work on creating a larger rehearsal hall is because being forced into the director's seat, it was clear in that moment that I wasn't getting the perspective that I needed to. The relationship between what the director sees and the actors, it was just too small. They're right on top of you. Yeah. So you have those kinds of lessons that maybe sitting on the sidelines you wouldn't know. And so it's not to say again that I'm not going to attempt to direct things. I do a lot with our students. I'm currently working with them and just did last night with our 10-minute musicals. They were student directed, but you go in and you do a little mentorship with them. So from a director standpoint, I've done that. And I also love to develop new work. And so typically when I've directed something, it's been something that I've developed because I have a very strong point of view or a vision on how I want the story told. So that comes out.
Yeah. I was reading, it's an interesting, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a struggle, but balance between picking shows that are kind of moving forward and visionary, and then also satisfying the subscribers here, because you put some plays in depending on the season. It's kind of like would you call that a balance?
Oh
between
yeah,
musicals and
no,
plays?
it absolutely is. And the perception for the Maltz Jupiter Theatre is that we're a musical theater house, but we are absolutely not. You look at any given season, we do 2 plays and 3 musicals. And I'm glad you used the word balance, because I think in many respects, on the surface, you may look at some of our seasons as a populous season, but in effect, it's not, because the range of the scope of work that we're doing encompasses perhaps a contemporary musical and a classic musical, which in both cases we're going to re-envision. We never ever produce the show as it was originally done.
I read this.
Yes.
That's very interesting to me. Is that from like set lighting, like from all aspects?
From all aspects,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean and I'm borrowing this from an ex-employee who used to say, when it comes to seeing a show, they would say, "Oh, like I've seen Cabaret before," and the expression we use is, "Have you had a steak before?" And then people go, "Well, yeah, I've had a steak before," and it's like, "Well, you haven't had it with our spices. We're gonna do the steak in a different way."
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why our audiences, though, enjoy coming here, because they can say, "Oh, well, I've seen Fiddler on the Roof, but I've only ever seen it with the Jerome Robbins choreography. Now we're going to do it." Marshall Milgram Dodge got the permission to not use the Jerome Robbins choreography and to have a new take on it completely. And what's that going to look like, and what does that do to the story? And it's really frankly the obligation of regional theaters and any new director. I mean, when if you're taking the ideas of the original director, that's their work, so really directors should be reinterpreting the work anyway. So it's nothing really groundbreaking or monumental. It's a responsibility, I think, that we have to do that.
Yeah, well put. So I want to jump a little back in time for you. Curious. I wanted to start with, and this is, again, correct me if anything I say is incorrect from the interweb, the move from Jersey to Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
What inspired that? Why did you come down here originally? And then what was the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre for you in your youth?
Sure. Well, I grew up in New Jersey after actually living in England for 2 years. My mother is British, and my father was a captain in the Air Force. And so for 2 years while he was fighting in Vietnam, my sister and I lived with my mother in England. And when he retired, he went to he took us back to New Jersey. So my cute little British accent that I had, went to New Jersey, and that kind of undid that,
Yeah, that's what.
Jumping from the sublime to the ridiculous, right? But I had a great upbringing in New Jersey, with my mother being very. She was a puppeteer, and she was very interested in making sure that our community had cultural activities. So she brought a circus to town. She regularly made sure that we had ballet performances in our school. So she was very much an influence of me as a young kid, and I was definitely a strange child. I loved magic. I loved. We had a Von Trapp style marionette theater in our basement with Pelham puppets, and I was just an odd kid. I liked making 8mm movies, and very kind of isolated, imaginative upbringing. And so anything that where I could go down in the basement and use my imagination was what I did. So
traveling from England to Jersey, what was that like culture? Why was there a culture shock for you?
Well, I mean, a little bit. I mean, just to be completely candid with you, I was very young. I was 5 and 6 years old when I came over, but it was a very odd experience to have very formative years of my life without my father, in them, and then suddenly this man shows up on your doorstep and takes you away from the what and takes you to another, actually coming back to the United States. I don't know directly how that influenced me, but I, I'm sure it did.
Yeah, no, it's because it's interesting. I didn't realize until I started traveling like worldwide 2 years ago how narrow-minded I was, because you don't think about that. You just live in your community, you go about your processes of living and culture. But even as a young child, traveling across the world.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, in the 60s, going over to England was like going to a whole new world. I mean, the world has, I think, become much more homogenized now. But when you went over there, most everything was different. The music was different. So I was listening to Queen and Kate Bush and, to all these artists that, not quite then, but in the later mid 70s when I was traveling back to England to see our family, I was, hearing music before it came over here, and the cars are different, and the restaurant and the food is different. Things are much. I mean, it still has its own flavor.
Everything is
exactly. Yeah. So being in New Jersey, I was there until I was 13. My father was a car salesman for Volvo. He happened to be the best in the world. He worked in Summit, New Jersey, and as a result of that, I had a nice middle class upbringing. My parents built their own home in New Jersey. We had a 40-foot Viking boat that we kept down the Shua. Wow. And so that's actually how I came down to Florida. Is my father had enough of that, and he wanted to do something else with his life, and it was a bit of an adventure. And so we took 3 weeks on our boat coming down to Florida through the intercoastal.
Sailed to Florida.
It wasn't a sailboat, but we came down through the intercoastal. It took us 3 weeks, and we ended up in Port Salerno at Pirates Cove, where we lived on our boat for 9 months while my parents found their home in Tequesta. And really that home and that move was really kind of the beginning of many years of happiness for them. And for me, a little bit of a culture shock coming from New Jersey, where the school system was very vibrant and very competitive, down to Florida, where in many respects we were about 2 years. What we were learning, I had learned 2 years prior to that, and there was actually probably more of a cultural difference between New Jersey and Florida than England and New Jersey. So that was a little bit of an adjustment, and being this kid who liked to hide out in his basement, and I'm super fair skinned, whatever, the idea of going to the beach and being a surfer was really not an option, given the fact that I would just turn bright red and it look like a lobster.
I have the same thing.
Right, exactly. Right. So I would, at the time, as fate would have it, Burt Reynolds was a superstar and had just built a dinner theater in our town. Jupiter was very, very small at that time. It only had one or two traffic lights. PGA ended. I-95 ended at PGA. In fact, the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre was coined the miracle at a truck stop by Charles Nelson Riley. I don't know if you remember him, but he was on Match Game, and a very and a Broadway actor, a Tony Award-winning Broadway actor. And he directed here a lot, and a very colorful character. But Burt had all of his very famous friends. So it was Carol Burnett, Farrah Fawcett did her stage debut on our stage. Sarah Jessica Parker was here, Ned Beatty, all of these major superstars. And so I was working at a local restaurant called the Log Cabin. It actually looked like a log cabin restaurant, and I was 15 years old, and I saw all of the waiters and waitresses from the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre coming over during their break for dinner, and I was like, I want to work at the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre. And it was many attempts for me to get in here, but I knew that this is where I wanted to be.
Why was it many attempts?
Well, because I was young and I didn't have any experience, and I I don't know. It's just you don't get everything you want the first time. But I'm pretty aggressive, and so I finally got a job, and after a little bit of a Me Too situation as a young person, we were living in different times.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing terrible. I don't want to give the,
No,
but it was,
wrong.
it was a different time when,
Yeah.
and how you got hired were, I was definitely checked out. Let me put it that way. It was a little uncomfortable. But I was, immediately put into the kitchen as a food server. But being ambitious, I worked my way up the ranks. It was a side station and then busboy, and then I became a waiter, and eventually I ended up working. Burt had a VIP boxes upstairs where all the celebrities and very wealthy people would come in, and we would do tableside service. And so I did that literally through my high school years, and then I actually put myself through college. I raised enough money myself because neither one of my parents had graduated college. I didn't really have a lot of guidance from them in terms of what to do to get into college, and I didn't really even understand the importance of it. But with a bit of a pause in going to college, I raised the money to do that, waiting tables here, and then ended up graduating from Florida State University in theater with more business credits than theater credits. So
Was that the original plan, or it just kind of happened that way?
Well, no, my dad being, what dad wants their kid to go into theater, right? So even though they weren't paying for it, you listen to your parents back then, I guess. And so I was taking business, more trying to make sure that I was keeping them happy. But in the end, I knew that I wanted to be a producer since I was a kid in that stupid little puppet theater downstairs. That's what people called me, so this was where I am right now is exactly what I wanted to be from a very young child. So I finished school. The dinner theater closed 10 years later with Burt. It was 1979 to 1989. The theater closed. I was here for the final performance. I actually attended the opening of the Kravitz Center, which is our local performing arts center, with Mr. Reynolds, who I hold in very high regard. He is responsible for Jupiter being put on the map, and for this theater being here. I mean, even though it's now the Maltz Jupiter Theatre, and I have amazing regard for our board of directors and Mr. and Mrs. Maltz. I mean, they're like family to me. Everything has to start somewhere, and so I don't lose sight of the fact of what Burt did for us many years ago. Yeah. So with that, it was time for me to move on and have a career. So I sent my resume out to every regional theater in the country. Again, not having a lot of experience, I heard from Portland Stage Company in Portland, Maine, and they offered me an internship. So I went again from the sublime to the ridiculous, from Florida to Portland, Maine, where it's super cold. And I was there for 2 years before then going on to Broadway, working for Margot Lyons. So it's kind of a very circuitous route.
Yeah. Going back to the dinner theater, when you're working the VIP boxes, was there any funny stories, or did you learn anything from? Did you get to chat with the people you were serving, or overhearing conversations?
All the time. Charles Durning's daughter, Michelle Durning, and I became friends, so I got to hang out. I got access to all of Burt Reyonlds' apprentices for 8 years. So when he was teaching class, I sometimes got to witness that process. I volunteered to do changeovers, which is the process where one show comes out and one goes in, because I wanted to learn. So peripherally, and then I was a production assistant here on a musical that went to Broadway called The News. So I actually learned word processing before computers even came out. They sent me off to school so that I could do script tracking. And Bill C. Davis, who wrote Mass Appeal, he and I became very good friends. And so, no, absolutely. But you know what? It's interesting. When I left the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre, I thought that I knew everything, being a cocky young person. I thought wow, I know everything that I need to know about theater, but it was really my work at Florida State University where you learn about playwriting and play structure and, the spine of the play and, direction and all of those details. And in fact, many of my theater classes I view as being much more difficult than my business classes because oftentimes business has a definitive answer, right?
Yeah.
Most times.
Yeah.
In theater, it doesn't. You have to defend your reasons for something. And so that was a new challenge for me as I was going through that. But yeah, here at the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre, I mean, these were major stars of their day. And, just by being here all the time, I absolutely learned a lot. I actually wrote my first musical in my early 20s that the Apprentice program produced. I had to then go out and raise $10,000, which I did. I threw our local art gallery. I knew of this notion of a backers audition, and so I knew people would serve champagne and they did an excerpts from the show, and then you raise money for it. So in my early 20s, I raised $10,000. It got the attention of our cultural council. We were on the cover of the magazine there, and all the newspapers wrote about it.
Of course.
And we ended up actually producing this large-scale musical. I think it was 26 characters. It was a musical called Switch that I wrote with John Mercurio, who I've remained friends and writing partners with my entire life. And in fact, during the ARC Festival recently, we just presented one of the musicals that we wrote, 1001 Nights. So again, these kind of relationships that you start as a very young people, you keep with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. That meeting, the audition you had for the backers with the champagne and everything,
Yeah.
were you communicating with the people watching it, or did you just put on the show and kind of
No,
enjoy it? Or
I asked for money.
You did?
Oh yeah, sure.
Is that the first time you had began to really ask?
Well, you know what? I think what it shows you is that if you want something in life, I think there are a lot of people who respond to people who have gumption and, chutzpah, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And people want to help people. It's just kind of inherent. And so here John and I were these young kids with a dream, and people wanted to help make that happen, And it's why I'm so passionate, though, about paying that forward and creating those opportunities for others, because that was done for me. And a lot of the reasons why, as much as I loved my Broadway experience, my 14 years working in New York, working in a community as an artistic director of a regional theater and helping to shape culture in your community where it affects students who grow up through your organization and patrons who enjoy the work that you're doing, it's in many ways more meaningful because it's legacy, right? I mean, not having any kids of my own. I have a 25-year-old, but through my partner Jay, it's his blood, and he's like a son to me. But I don't have any kids of my own. The notion of having legacy and making the world or a community better is so rewarding and meaningful.
Yeah. What have you learned about relationships in the theater community? Because it's a small community.
Yeah.
And I feel relationships are key.
Yeah, and I have a couple different buckets, and a lot of times they overlap. But I have my New York relationships of my 14 years in New York, where I know most of the contemporary composers, Andrew Lippa, Jason Robert Brown, pretty much everybody, because we all grew up together in New York, and so I have my New York bucket, and then I have my regional theater bucket, where you developed the talents of many more artisans, set designers, directors, all different kinds of designers. And then I also had my Tony Award bucket. So I was working on the TV side of the Tony Awards as a producer for 13 years. So I have all that group of people then too, and they do overlap. But you're absolutely right. I think having strong relationships is key to success. I think it's not always possible for one reason or another. People move on, they mature. You grow at cross purposes sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I think overall the goal is to have to deepen relationships because that's where the great work happens.
Yeah.
It actually, one of the things that I insist on here at the Maltz Jupiter Theatre is kind of like a corporate philosophy in some respects. There are two words that I insist that everybody have in their DNA when they come here and they do their work, and the two words are talented and nice. Obviously talented because you need to be contributing to a bigger idea, and nice is important to me because what we do is so difficult, and when you have someone being an emotional vampire or taking away from that, it can really take a project.
Emotional vampire. Sorry,
yeah.
I like that. Okay,
Yeah.
it could take away from a project.
and derail it, and
Yeah.
so I really ask people when they come here to make a conscious choice to not only bring their best work but their best attitude to it, and I think it really helps. People often remark on that, even on the backstage door. As you're opening the door, if you look down at the bottom of the door, there's a saying that says, "Please take responsibility for the energy you bring into this building," and that's again just a reminder that we all have the ability to make choices, and just bring your best choice, bring your best attitude.
Yeah. What did your parents teach you about taking responsibility, like 100% ownership? for
Well,
yourself?
yeah, great question, and I have an immediate answer. My mother, being British and very proper, taught me your word is your bond. I mean, we deal with a lot of contracts in our business, but contracts are really created for worst case scenarios, or if you have a misunderstanding, right? I just didn't understand that that's the relationship that we were getting into. Is the
I know exactly what you mean.
right?
Yeah.
So the contracts are helpful to settle that, but really, in a perfect world, if you say something, then you do it, even to your own, demise. Not demise, but your own, whatever you want to call it. If you say you're going to do something, then you do it. Then that was your word is your bond is a quality that my mother taught me growing up. And probably another one that I was taught, and again, this is coming from two people who were not college educated, but they truly believed that you can have or do anything that you want in your life if you're hardworking, and so just go for it, and kind of life takes you where you need to go. I've attempted many things in my career, and the world has told me, no, get back on track, or move slightly this way. Yeah, stay in your lane, right? And you just have to pay attention. You just have to listen to those cues. So yeah.
Has that gotten easier? Naturally, I guess it's like a cultivated thing.
Well, what I tell the young people who come here is when you're starting out, your opportunities are an inverted pyramid, right? It's upside down. All your opportunities they're wide open at the top. And as you get older, that pyramid kind of flips back around. And it's not to say, you hear all these success stories of people changing their lives in their later years, right? But it becomes more and more difficult. For example, I'm not going to become a surgeon. That's not really in my cards anymore, right? And it's not to say though that you can't reinvent yourself, but the pyramid does flip over as you move through, and rightfully so. I've had a very wonderful career in the theater. And and you know, everyone gets their chance, right? And so eventually, even with this organization, there'll come a time when it's time for me to pass the baton, you know. And so I think as theater people, we're always constantly thinking about passing that baton and what that means to again, for legacy, but also to train people so that they can carry on this rich thing called theater. So anyway,
That did.
Yeah,
That definitely did.
question, yeah.
How about with your father? Was there anything he taught you in particular with like good work ethic or discipline?
Well, again, you know, I saw what he had to do in order to give my sister and my mother and my family a good life, and you know that didn't come from, you know, it came from hard work, serious hard work, and that sometimes meant that he wasn't around, you know, that he would be working late hours, and I think that's probably true of that entire generation. You know, we talk about how hard working people are today and the amount of time, but I think anybody who is looking to better themselves or change their lives around, there's nothing like sweat equity, right? You just have to kind of put the time in.
Just do it.
Yeah, you have to just jump in. And so yes, I mean,
With that as your example, how can you not jump in?
yeah, and you know, I had two parents. My father was obviously a captain in the Air Force, so he was very disciplined and regimented. And so when he said jump, you said how high, and you know, it became about everything was kind of on a time schedule, and you lived up to that. And my mother was super sensitive, and you know, kind of an artist in her own sense, and so I got a little bit of both of them, you know, in combining, and that's why I think the sensitivity of saying, oh, you have to have a good work culture, you have to have a good work environment, versus the discipline of working, you know, doing 10 meetings a day. You know what I'm saying? So the
balance.
So yeah, it is the balance. I definitely have not figured out the work-life balance. You know, that is definitely something that I, you know, have to work on. But I am ambitious, and so with ambition comes hard work.
Yeah, naturally. Have you ever waited for permission, or have you anyone to give it to you, or you just always gave yourself permission with the backer thing and taking over this theater and the work in Maine and New York and the Tonys and everything? It's like you just went for it?
Yeah, I mean, the Tony Awards is a great example, though, of chutzpah and just kind of going after something. I wrote a letter to the executive producers, Ricky Kirshner and Glenn Weiss, 4 or 5 years. And it wasn't until my 5th year that I finally got a phone call.
How many letters?
It was 5 years, 5 letters, yeah. And I wrote to them every year. I'm still interested, blah, blah, blah. And to be honest, it was the year that I gave up that I said, okay, well, I guess this isn't going to happen, that I got the phone call. And Ricky Kirshner, who's the son of a very well-known producer, and Glenn Weiss, who's a rising director, called me up and said, would you be interested in being the creative consultant to the Tony Awards? We're TV people, and you're a theater person. Can you help us, you know, understand what the audience is going to like and not like? And, you know, now they're producers of everything, the Academy Awards and, you know, the halftime show and Kennedy Center. They do not need my opinion now. And I mean, they have their own relationships with everyone. But in those early days, you know, they brought me on, and kind of not knowing exactly what they were asking of me. My best friend worked for Gene Shalit, the film critic on the Today Show. And so I knew that we were doing some kind of TV thing. So I asked for a lunch with Gene Shalit's producer, and he took me for a burger. And over the time, he taught me how to do an interview and, you know, all of that. And so midway through my first year of the Tony Awards, the line producer, Alan Kelman, came up to me and he said, the guys, meaning the producers of the Tonys, they think you're doing a great job, but they're just wondering why you're here every day. And I was like, I thought I was supposed supposed to, but I just jumped in. I knew nothing about TV. And so I just learned it. I just figured it out. And the very next year, they made me a segment producer and creative consultant that year. The next year, they made me the coordinating producer of the Tony Awards in title. And so for 5 weeks out of the year, I would fly to New York and immerse myself in that. But I wasn't doing the theater part of it. I was actually creating with the post-production team, the videos, the in memoriam section, the
nominee section,
all the nominee reels, the plays in review. That was a whole section. The best play segments. So I was producing all of that. And again, what it goes to show you though is that yes, I didn't ask for permission. I just jumped in and did it. And I think that that's probably a recurring theme for me, because even when it comes to running a regional theater, I had no experience doing that before either. And upon getting the invitation to come down here, now many of the things that I learned on Broadway, through the best, the best people in New York, Michael David from the Dodgers, who produced Jersey Boys. He was the general manager for my the first show that I worked on, it was Jelly's Last Jam. Rick Ellis, who wrote Jersey Boys, and Peter and the Starcatcher. He was actually the ad executive at Sereno Coin at the time. So he had he wasn't playwriting to the extent that he is now. So these are the people that you learn on. So in many ways, Broadway was my my master's degree. Because I was learning from the best people on Broadway. And so when you come then down to work for regional theater, although I hadn't directly worked with a board of directors, I'd indirectly done that through producing shows for Lincoln Center and doing other things. I'd peripherally worked with board of directors, Playwrights Horizons, et cetera. All of the skill set that you learn on Broadway, that all applied. You come in and you've been doing it for a while,
right?
So it transfers over.
Can you talk about the specific moment you decided to come back here and kind of save Maltz Jupiter? Was there like a little wrestling with the idea, or was it like a no-duh?
I love this notion though that I was coming to save the Maltz Jupiter Theater.
I mean, it's just what's the talk on the street. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean that is a wonderful compliment, but one that I'm not accepting alone. What I was asked to come through is at the beginning of the Maltz Jupiter Theater days, the theater itself, the community hadn't figured out what it wanted it to be yet, and unfortunately for the person who started the theater, he gets a lot of credit for saving the theater, but I think it probably just took a stronger producerial hand, which I had. And Milton Maltz, whose name is on the building, actually called me to a meeting probably when the first idea of the theater, and he said, "Listen, I've just heard about you in Jupiter, and I'm not offering you a job. I have no job to offer you." He goes, "I just wanted to meet you." So he and his wife Tamar Maltz were at the Sherry Netherlands, and I went up to their suite and sat down with them, and we kind of talked for an hour or so. And it wasn't probably a year and a half or 2 years later, I was actually working on the Tony Awards when I got a phone call from Milton Maltz, and he said, "Are you interested in coming back down to Florida?" And in my mind, no disrespect to Jupiter and the place that but I was very happy in New York, and I was like, no, I don't really want to go back. You don't go home again,
Yeah.
And my partner Jane and I actually flew down here. My mother lives in Tequesta now, so she lives here. And so we said, oh, we'll visit her. And I walked into the theater, and they'd done such a magnificent job renovating the insides of the theater. There was a lot of work outside of that needed to be done. It was an unfinished lobby, and but our marketing director had just put out a beautiful brochure of their upcoming season, and I thought, if we can make the shows on our stage look as good as this brochure, then we have a fighting chance. And so early days of the Maltz Jupiter Theater, though, literally my first job at hand was to make sure that we had couches in the lobby, because it looked like a bingo lounge, to an old age home. It was unfinished. Posters were stapled to the back wall of the box office, and I thought, well, no one's going to come here if it looks like it's going to fold up, in 2 weeks. So I went around trying to get local companies to donate furniture because we had no money. And finally, this local company called the Yum Yum Tree, they sell wicker furniture, and they donated $10,000 worth of beautiful, frankly, wicker furniture that we put in there. I got a plant company to donate plants, so it had plants. We printed up vinyl banners to make it look like it was Lincoln Center. Drawing off of whatever we could. We hand stenciled the logo and hand painted the logo on the back wall of the box office. And my first job that I gave myself was because I had heard that the shows were inconsistent. That one show might be really great. They would do Anna in the Tropics. It'd be really great. And the next show they would do is Golf the Musical, right? And so it was kind of like, people were like, oh, I love it. Oh, what's going on? I love it. So the notion was consistent quality and putting a face to the theater. So my very first job I gave myself was to stand at the front door for every performance and to welcome people. And the looks that I got from people as they walked in the door, like, who the hell is this guy, right? Yeah. But I did that for a while, and they began to understand that someone was in the building who loved it and was going to make sure, right? And it was literally like having bad credit. Sometimes it's easier to have no credit than bad credit, right? Yeah. But people had made their minds up that, like, I'm not so sure. And so we had to turn that around, and with really quite an amazing group of people, staff members and donors and board members who we all kind of hunkered in, we changed that, but it took years. It took like 3 years. So I started here with 2,400 subscribers, and now we're up over 8,000. We have 100,000 visitors. The capacity in the house was under 50%. Now we're averaging, we were averaging 96 to 97% capacity. So we added an additional club level, another 7,000 seats, and now we're growing into that. This year we did 93% capacity overall. So it's just it's about loving something, right? It's like having we always refer to it as we do what's best for the baby, and the theater's the baby, and sometimes it cries and you have to be here for it,
Yeah.
So
I love that. I have so many questions from that. Okay. All right. What do you hope to teach the theater goers here that attend the Maltz Jupiter?
Well, I think anytime you can bring people in and change the way they see the world, regardless of whatever play it is, sometimes you can do that through entertaining people. And, Rodgers and Hammerstein is such a good example of that. But frankly, a chorus line teaches you the passion of individuals or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You hope that people are not just coming for entertainment value, but they want some kind of catharsis or change or reflection in how they see the world. But then also with our school, we have a after-school program. We're teaching kids. We had 250 kids over the course of the week, and we have a wonderful Director of Education, Julie Rowe, who is equally passionate about making sure that our community is served with great opportunities for our youth. And so teaching our audiences, it's not really, you don't set out, I don't think, to teach anything to people, but I can honestly say that I never produce a show that I don't love myself, right? I have to really want it to happen. And then also maybe show the different kinds of theater or different styles. So to that end, with the directors that I choose and the designers, I always want the experience when you walk into our theater to be different. That's why we don't have resident designers. I want people to say, like, oh, we're storytelling in a different way. And I think it keeps it interesting, right? Because when you're making a $300 commitment for a subscription, you don't want to grow tired. You want to, every time you walk in the theater, you want to be able to say, "Oh wow, something new is about to happen."
Yeah. So how are you finding the balance between fulfillment and achievement? Is that kind of go hand in hand for you, or is there a...
Well, early on, when the baby's crying, right, and you don't have the resources that you do, you have to think about creating a strong foundation for the organization. I think that's probably where a lot of the ideas of doing populist work came from. You have, the number one rule of producing is know your audience, right? So I spend a lot of time in the lobby listening to what people are saying, right? Yeah. I'm frankly more interested in what the public says than what the critics say, because I actually don't always agree either way with the critics. Sometimes I feel like our work is great and they don't like it, and other times they like it and I think it could have been better, right? So I'm very self-critical with that. But when it comes to the audience, they're the ones who you're really ultimately serving. So we're just getting to a place now after achieving a $10 million endowment where we're able to fund new initiatives like the ARC New Works Festival that we're doing right now, where we're bringing to life 5 new plays or musicals in various stages of completion, and you can only do that when you can afford to do that. It's an expensive proposition. That alone is $50,000 to be able to fly people in from New York and put orchestras together and feed them and house them, and it's an expensive proposition, but it's that kind of commitment that I'm excited about, because again, as a young playwright, when the community wrote that $10,000 check collectively to bring my dream, right, you have to then think about those other people who don't have that opportunity, who that now we can provide that for them, right? So it is a payback.
Has that taught you a lot about leadership? Have you learned a lot about like being a leader through running this theater?
Well, I mean, you never stop learning on how to be a good leader. Sometimes you think that your job is to be a parent, and so I think about my parents and the kind of good cop, bad cop, or the business side and the sensitive side, and am I a friend to the staff, or am I the person who they have to answer to? And but at the end of the day, I think I just I try and be myself. I wake up every day with the notion of doing my best work and with a community in mind, that I'm serving a community, and so what are they looking for? How can I be helpful to make that happen for them? But leadership, you go off course and you make mistakes and you fail.
Can I ask what mistakes you've made that have proved essential in learning?
Well, the theater's just after many years of staff staying with us, we had a big changeover this past season. So you have to analyze in those moments what, even if it's not directly tied to you're still the leader, and you have to look at, what was the reason for the departures, like I'm the general or the captain leading people into a war every year, and so am I too ambitious, and maybe I need to back off of things, and find more balance, because I've found that generally people you are a bit of a parent. People are looking to please you all the time, right? And with that comes a tremendous amount of responsibility in making sure that you're taking care of them as you move forward. And then, we're also an organization, a regional, now becoming a LORT B+ theater, which is, there's only going to be 6 B+ theaters in the country. Maltz Jupiter Theatre is one of them. And so we're beginning our 15th season. We're young for the regional theater movement. Most of the regional theaters across the country were started 50 and 60 years ago. So we're kind of a teenager to their mature adult
Silver Sneakers Club.
Yeah, so exactly. And so with that comes a little bit of people moving, a bit of Peter's principle, where people get you to a certain level in your organization, and then it's time to get some new blood, or so there's
Because you grow quick, yeah.
Yeah, we're going so fast, and it's different in every situation, but yeah, huge, painful moments along with all the success and the joy. You're constantly learning to be a better leader and checking in with yourself.
Yeah. How do you give feedback? What do you have, like a technique for feedback, or
For myself?
Yeah, for yourself.
Or how do I give?
Yeah, how do you give it to others or receive it? Do you have others giving it to you?
Well, I'll give you both sides of the coin.
Great.
So what I've learned from my writing days, and when you're dealing with artists, is that you have to respect the work that they've created thus far, right? And thank them and acknowledge that before they can be open to hearing any new thoughts. I also believe that when you empower people to do their work, you have to let them do their work. So when I give comments, it's typically, it goes like this typically. Listen, I know that I've hired you as the director, and I know that you probably, what I'm going to say is going to make you want to make changes, but you don't have to. I'm giving you my point of view and how I see what I'm looking at. And if it's useful to you, then you can take it. Mm-hmm. And if it's not, but you can't empower them and then take that power away.
Yeah.
And there have been situations where I haven't agreed with the decisions, but that doesn't mean that I'm right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes people have proven me wrong, in my opinion. They've stuck to what they are going to do.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of that, it's very hard when you're the head of an organization, because usually people who are working for you don't want to criticize you or say anything to you. So you have to pay attention to the nonverbal cues and the energy in the room, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of
and then
it.
also I do hear from our board and then the community. I mean, South Florida is not shy of saying, you know what you should do, Everyone, no, really. So I get that all the time, and people are pretty vocal, and I make myself available. I'm down in the lobby. Most people know me. They can approach me and tell me what they think, and I don't always love what they have to say, but you say, thank you very much.
See you next time. Yeah. Who are you at your best? Who are you when you are at your best?
I mean, I love people. So I think that kind of one of the things that I do best is help people to realize their full potential. You know what I mean? I want everyone to be great. And I think that's probably one of the difficult things for me in being a leader is when I see the train about to hit the car, I want to jump in there and be like, you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit. Like, be careful, right? Yeah. And sometimes you have to let people make their mistakes. And so I'm now learning to evaluate, is that going to be a fatality? Is it just going to be a nick? Are they going to get out of the way before the train hits? And I have to kind of now pay attention to that dynamic. But I love when people do their best work, and I honestly I feel like a coach in that respect, that I want on behalf of our organization, I want everyone to do their best. And so I feel like I'm the cheerleader, or the conductor of the orchestra. And so if someone's out of tune, you just want to be like, boop, 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 boop,
no.
bring that up, just so that we can be good as a whole. But I really don't have any one particular job to do other than to make sure it all, and the unity of vision, how the organization appears from the moment you buy a ticket to customer service, to what the building looks like and the vibe of the building, to the experience of the theater, to the experience of the actors in our housing. We do a lot to thank our donors, to make them feel appreciated. We have 400 volunteers, a school. So you have all these different contingent groups, right, who are invested, and they're investing their time into your organization. So you want to make sure that that's all running smoothly, and that it's all served well. Right?
Is this how you view happiness?
Oh, I don't even come close to knowing what that is.
Oh,
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that, they say that if you love your work, right, then that's where happiness is. But
yeah.
But I don't know. With ambition too comes, it's always the kind of there's no there there. Like I'm always, and that's maybe where I get into a little bit of trouble, is that I'm always like, okay, now what can I do? And especially if I have a little rest, or if I travel. Going, like you were talking about, going to Europe or to other theaters. Like I'm a constant student, and I'm like, or even Disney World, like how Walt Disney World does what they do. Like playing what the music that's playing in the lobby, or it all matters. And I'm just a big student. I go out and I kind of soak it up, and I bring the ideas back here, and apply them. So.
You have such a keen sense of awareness, self-awareness, and awareness around you, because most people don't notice that. I mean, I notice it, walking down Main Street, USA, how the music follows the parade and how they figure that out and everything. Oh. And even the setup of your lobby is gorgeous. But a lot of people don't notice that. Like, I would say, the average citizen doesn't pick up on all of that.
Right. They do subconsciously, though. And that's why that's why you pay attention to the details, because subconsciously they do, and they know when something isn't right. They may not know why, but they know.
Not articulate it, yeah.
Right, but they can tell that something's not right, or that something has to change. It's just chief cook and bottle washer. I mean, it's just all encompassing and exhausting. We're at the tail end of our season, and I'm definitely at a place where I need to recharge my batteries. I know it. I just literally feel my body like I'm spent. Yeah, I'm spent. But it usually is not that much time. It's usually a couple days, and I'm kind of already sticking my head up, going like, what's next? I'm ready. Here we go.
What's most important to you in life?
A couple things, and again, I think it changes as you grow through this. I mean, right now it's becoming more about being still, about learning to be a little more reflective, and so what that means for me is spending time with my partner and traveling. We travel very, very well together. We love our adventures, and I view that as an investment, literally. So we go and do really cool things in the summer. We went on the Orient Express last year, and we like to go to different countries, and so that. What was the question again? Just
in life, what's most important to you?
Yeah, that, and just people again. I think it's going back to the notion of greatness too. Like, I think doing great work,
setting people up for great success. I love that. I absolutely love that. Do you have a spiritual practice?
I don't. My parents. My father was Catholic and actually left the church, being disenfranchised. And my parents encouraged me to go to church. So I did go with friends usually to different churches and synagogues or whatever. And I believe that we all know good from bad, and I was raised with those core values. So although I think religion is very, very key to a lot of people, it wasn't something that I was raised in, but I was raised with the core values. And I get actually a little envious of people who have that faith that helps guide them through their lives, because I wasn't raised with that, so I have to look elsewhere. But I kind of feel like God is within all of us, and so we know, like the moment that you do something wrong, if you're a normal person, you've done something wrong. So do something about it. Say, I'm sorry, try and close the gap, just do the right thing, make the better choice.
And that can be difficult sometimes for some to admit that.
I mean, perhaps for some, but I just feel like by not doing it, it's more agony having to live inside your head than just, it's just so much easier just to go like, oh man, I was such a jerk just now. I'm sorry. You don't deserve that.
Yeah.
To get it over with, like to have to go, drive away and be mad and spend all that time living in that kind of cesspool of unhappiness with that. It's just so much easier just to recognize your role in it.
Yeah.
Even if you're right, sometimes just being vulnerable with another human being, just saying like, listen, that was unfortunate what we just went through. Can we try and work through it? And that's not always possible. I mean, I'm not trying to, put myself on any kind of pedestal saying that I've figured it out. I haven't. I've had a very unfortunate, important relationships dissolve, or, but I think in making those mistakes, you try and better the next time.
Yeah, and that's taking responsibility, and it's difficult.
It is taking responsibility. Such a basic idea, isn't it? But if we all just took a little more responsibility with everything that we're doing, just
the world
own
would
it.
be a little bit better.
I mean, I think it's one of the biggest issues that we're going through right now is that people, I don't know what is going on. I worry.
A lot of insecurities is what I think. But you know what? I could
perhaps maybe we're just, if you think in the history of time, we're in better straits now than, we've ever been. Yeah. Even with the conflict that's going on around the world or in politics or whatever, we really should be more grateful.
Yeah. Grateful.
Yeah,
gratitude
for what we do have, instead of fussing about what we don't have. I think that if we all, and a lot of that I think comes from the fact that and I don't want to get into politics or anything, but that we haven't had to, I was in New York during 9/11, and so we came together as a country then, so that's a moment, but we don't have any major wars, or we don't have, anything to really come together with, because I think in those moments we do. And I think though that we need to be more mindful and remember more about what that would mean for us if we were ever faced to do that, and just kind of live as if it had happened.
Yeah. All right, we're wrapping up here. I got 2 more questions for you. Okay, is there a common piece of incorrect advice that you hear most often in your field?
Incorrect advice? I don't know. That's a really hard question. I don't really live in that. I can't really honestly think of anything in particular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a most worthwhile investment, skill set, money, or time? You're glad you really invested, time in this theater, or money in college education, or anything in particular that kind of...
I think that my time here at the Maltz Jupiter Theatre has been the best chapter of my life, because of the effect that we have on our community that I mentioned earlier. But to not recognize everything that came before it would be a mistake, because that gave me the tools and the resources to be able to do that in different ways, right? So just kind of going back, the Burt Reyonlds Dinner Theatre in my formative years taught me how to have gumption and to go for something. It taught me to go for it, right? And then college taught me the classics and the importance of history of theater. And then my regional theater work at Portland Stage Company was a further extension of that, where it was playwrights that the average person doesn't know, and about craft. From Richard Hamburger, who was the artistic director, and about detail, when he put a set up and if it jutted out into the audience, that would be finished, before, all the details that go into putting that. Then to my work with Margot Lyon, who's the lead producer of Jelly's Last Jam and Angels in America. I worked on both parts of the original production on Broadway, and all of the people that surrounded those productions and how I learned from them. Then going out on my own and creating a new musical that was developed down at the Public Theater called Street Songs that became a $6 million musical. It opened the New York Hotel in Las Vegas, and in learning the pain that comes from creating a beautiful project about street musicians that then becomes a commercial venture, and how the change that has to happen as a result of that, to relationships that have gone south, or that you don't get to control the world. Things happen that you don't have control over, and then coming here and learning how an unpolished jewel can become something magnificent if you love it a lot.
I love that. Is there, metaphorically speaking, a quote or a word that you would put on a billboard for millions to see? Is there anything that comes to mind of a message?
Talented and nice.
Talented and nice. I really love that. Thank you.
And it actually is on our walls in the theater, so to remind everybody.
Yes, and I love what's on your stage door too.
Yeah.
That's taking responsibility. I absolutely
take responsibility
love that,
for the energy you bring into this building. Very simple.
I love that. So simple. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking this time with me.
Yes, I loved it. Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It was a good therapy session.
Yes. And so where can we find you / the theater, keep up with all that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for asking. We have a wonderful website, and on there lists everything that we're doing at any given time. It's jupitertheatre.org. And poke around on the menu, because everything is listed on there that we're working on. And please, if you're ever in the area, I'm super proud of the work that we're doing by national artists here in sunny Jupiter, Florida. So come check out the Maltz Jupiter Theatre. We're emerging, we're growing, and the work is really solid.
Absolutely beautiful space you have here. And I haven't even seen the theater yet. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review and subscribe. You can also listen to this podcast on Stitcher and Google Play. You can follow us on Instagram @_entertainmentx_. Have a great day.